What if I told you the scariest show you watched as a kid was never meant to be funny at all? Courage the Cowardly Dog looked like a cartoon, but behind the bright colors was something darker. Something that played with your fears, your nightmares, and even the things you couldn't explain as a child. And here's the real question: was Courage fighting monsters? Or was he fighting the demons inside us all? Courage lives in the middle of nowhere, literally a broken-down farmhouse, surrounded by endless deserts, empty fields, and a horizon that feels too far away. From the very first moment you see that house, you know something is wrong. It doesn't feel safe. It feels trapped, cut off from the rest of the world. And that is exactly why the horror works. Think about it. When you were young, fear was never about what you could see. Fear was about the things hiding in the dark corners, the things you thought were there but couldn't prove. Courage the Cowardly Dog brought those hidden fears to life. Every episode turned the unknown into something real. Monsters, ghosts, aliens, demons, each one stepping out of the shadows to test Courage's strength. Take cats, for example. A calm, polite, red-colored cat. At first, he doesn't even look scary. But his voice, his slow movements, and the way he smiles, it's unnatural. It's not about jump scares. It's about the feeling that something is deeply wrong, even though you can't point to it directly. That's true horror, when the world looks normal, but your instincts scream that it. I is saying single quotes, D. Then there's Freaky Fred, the episode that still makes people shiver. He isn't a monster. He isn't even violent in the traditional sense. He's just wrong. His obsession with shaving hair, his creepy rhyming voice, the way the camera zooms on his face as he says, "Naughty," it's not blood or gore that makes Fred terrifying. It's the fact that he could be real. He could be someone you actually meet. And that makes him scarier than any alien or ghost. And of course, who could forget King Ramses' curse? The CGI ghost that shows up outside the farmhouse, repeating his chilling lines, "Return the slab," or "Suffer my curse." It's burned into our memories, not just because of the animation, but because of how wrong it felt compared to everything else in the show. It was out of place, out of time, and that made it stick in your brain like a nightmare that won't fade, the scariest part. Courage was always alone. He couldn't leave. The farmhouse was his prison, and every monster knew exactly where to find him. The setting made it worse because no one was coming to help. There were no neighbors, no police, no friends. Just Courage, Muriel, and Eustace, and the endless parade of things that wanted to hurt them. The show used silence, too. Sometimes nothing happened for a few seconds. No music, no sound. Just Courage breathing heavily or the sound of the wind outside. And that silence made you uneasy, because you knew something bad was about to happen. But here's the twist. The monsters weren't always monsters. Sometimes they were lonely. Sometimes they were misunderstood. Sometimes Courage wasn't fighting them at all, he was helping them. And that blurred line between enemy and friend is part of what made the show so unsettling. Because in real life, not all dangers come with fangs or glowing eyes. Some come with a smile. Some come with a helping hand. That's the genius of Courage the Cowardly Dog. It dressed itself as a kid's show, but it was really teaching us something about fear. Fear isn't just about what's in front of you. Fear is about not knowing what's real, what's safe, and who you can trust. And in Nowhere, you couldn't trust anyone. Courage may have been called a coward, but if you look closely, he was never really weak. In fact, the entire show was built on the idea that true bravery is not the absence of fear, it is action in the middle of it. Every time Courage trembled, screamed, or turned into a frantic ball of panic, he still did the one thing that mattered. He stepped forward. He fought, he protected, he risked everything for Muriel, even when he had no reason to believe he could win. That's where the idea of an exorcism comes in. No, not with holy water or priests chanting in Latin, but in the way Courage constantly had to drive away the demons of fear. Each episode was like a ritual. The monster would arrive, Courage would panic, and then he would face it anyway. Slowly, through pain and struggle, he would push the evil away, sometimes by fighting, sometimes by outsmarting, and sometimes by simply enduring. Take the demon in the mattress episode. Muriel buys a new bed that happens to be possessed by a demon. At night, she gets trapped in it and starts changing into something unrecognizable, almost like she is being swallowed whole. Courage doesn't run. He doesn't give up. He goes into the demon's world, armed with nothing but his desperation to save Muriel. It feels like an exorcism because it is one. The demon is literally taking over, and Courage must fight it out of her or think about Eustace, the grumpy old man who spends most of his time mocking Courage. In many ways, Eustace is a demon too. Not in the supernatural sense, but in the emotional sense. He belittles Courage, calls him stupid dog, and laughs at his fear. For Courage, that's a battle as frightening as any ghost. Because how do you fight the person who is supposed to be family, but makes you feel worthless? Yet even then, Courage doesn't abandon Muriel. He doesn't leave the house. He stays, he endures. That's his exorcism, silencing the voice that tells him he's too weak, too small, too stupid. And Muriel? She represents the heart. The reason Courage never gives up. She is kindness, patience, and comfort in a world filled with darkness. When she pats his head and says, there, Courage remembers why he has to keep fighting. It's not for himself, it's for her. Protecting Muriel is his purpose. She is his light in the shadows, and she gives him the strength to face whatever curse, monster, or cosmic nightmare comes their way. Now here's where the show becomes even more interesting. The monsters themselves were not always purely evil. Sometimes they were misunderstood, broken, or simply different. Courage's encounters with them often blurred the line between enemy and victim. For example, there was the lonely ghost girl who only wanted to be remembered, or the alien ducks who just wanted their stolen egg back. These weren't villains in the traditional sense. They were outsiders, lost souls searching for something. And Courage, terrified as he was, often became their guide. So, what does all this mean? It means Courage the Cowardly Dog was never just about jump scares or creepy visuals. It was about emotional exorcism. Each monster represented a fear of being alone, fear of being hurt, fear of being powerless. And every time Courage confronted those fears, he was performing a kind of ritual. He screamed, yes. He shook, yes. But he stood his ground. And in the end, he survived, and isn't that what bravery really is? Not the absence of fear, but the decision to face it anyway. Courage didn't have weapons. He didn't have superpowers. All he had was his love for Muriel and his stubborn will to protect her. That was enough to banish every demon. That was enough to make him a hero, even if he never believed it himself. This is why the show stays in our memory. It wasn't just scary for the sake of being scary. It was showing us that fear is natural, but it doesn't control us. That even in the middle of nowhere, even when the odds are stacked against us, we can stand up and fight. Courage didn't need an exorcist. He was the exorcist driving out the demons of fear, one nightmare at a time. Courage was always caught in a paradox. He was both the weakest and the strongest character in the story. On the surface, he was a victim constantly trembling, screaming, and dragged into horrors he never asked for. But underneath, he was also the hero, always the one standing between danger and Muriel. This strange balance is what made the show unforgettable. It wasn't about a superhero who never feared. It was about an ordinary creature who was afraid of everything, but still found a way to save the day. Think about the way Courage reacted to fear. He didn't hide his emotions. He didn't mask them with bravado. When something terrifying appeared, he wailed, his eyes bulged out, his body shook like jelly. He became a cartoon exaggeration of raw panic. But that's the beauty of it, because deep down, he expressed the exact way we feel when confronted with something unknown. We may not scream like Courage, but inside, our hearts pound the same way. His panic was honest, and yet, despite that panic, he always acted. That's what made him a hero. Now let's talk about the monsters. They weren't just creatures of the night. Many of them were symbols of very real human struggles. Take the Tower of Dr. Zalost episode. Here we meet a villain who isn't motivated by power or destruction, but by deep sadness. Dr. Zalost spreads misery across the land because he is drowning in his own. His tower is a prison of despair, and he wants everyone else to suffer with him. When Courage confronts him, it's not a battle of fists or claws. It's a battle of empathy. Courage doesn't destroy Dr. Zalost, he shows him kindness. And that moment transforms the villain. Suddenly you realize this show wasn't just about defeating monsters. It was about healing them. Other times, the monsters reflected darker truths. Freaky Fred, for instance, was terrifying because he wasn't supernatural. He was human. He represented the reality that not all threats come from the outside world. Sometimes they come from people you know. His obsession with shaving heads wasn't violent in a bloody sense, but it was invasive, unsettling, and disturbingly intimate. Watching Fred reminded us that evil doesn't always come with glowing eyes or sharp teeth. Sometimes it comes with a smile and a quiet voice, but Courage's response to these horrors is where his heroism shines. He never wanted to fight. He never sought adventure. All he wanted was peace with Muriel. Yet, time after time, he stepped into the unknown because someone he loved was in danger. That's what made him different from other cartoon heroes. He wasn't fighting for glory or recognition. He was fighting for love. His love for Muriel was stronger than his fear of anything else. And that love gave him a kind of courage no exorcist or warrior could match. Even his relationship with Eustace revealed this dual role of victim and hero. Eustace mocked him, scared him, and treated him as useless. For Courage, that was another battle. The emotional battle of enduring cruelty while still holding on to his sense of purpose. He couldn't fight Eustace directly because Muriel loved him. So instead, Courage suffered in silence, carrying the pain while still protecting the family. That is a very human experience, standing strong in toxic situations because someone you care about needs you. Courage was victimized by Eustace, but he was heroic in choosing not to abandon Muriel because of it. This duality also explains why the show still resonates with us as adults. When we were children, we only saw the monsters. As adults, we see the metaphors. We see how fear isn't just about ghosts and demons. Fear is about loneliness, sadness, cruelty, and the unknown. And Courage faced all of it with nothing more than loyalty and determination. The irony is that the very thing everyone mocked him for, his cowardice, was what made him truly brave. Because without fear, there can be no courage. A fearless hero is impressive, yes, but a terrified hero who acts anyway? That's inspiring. That's real. Courage showed us that fear doesn't have to control us. It can be the fire that pushes us forward. So when you look at Courage, don't just see a scared little dog. See the victim who became a warrior. See the trembling hands that still reached out to protect. See the tears that didn't stop him from saving Muriel again and again. He was a reminder that bravery doesn't always roar. Sometimes bravery is a whimper, a shaky step, or a scream in the dark. And yet, it is still bravery all the same. Courage, the cowardly dog, ended years ago, yet it never really left us. Unlike many cartoons that faded into nostalgia, Courage clings to the edges of our memory, surfacing late at night when the house is quiet and shadows stretch across the walls. Why? Because it wasn't just a children's show. It was a mirror of fear, loneliness, and love, all wrapped in surreal horror. That's why even today, grown adults confess that certain episodes still unsettle them. Courage's world was animated, but the emotions it carried were painfully real. The farmhouse in the middle of nowhere wasn't just a funny setting. It was a symbol of isolation. No neighbors, no safety nets, no one to run to. For many kids watching, that house echoed their own childhood feelings: being small, being helpless, being alone in a world that didn't always make sense. Every monster that arrived was another reminder that safety was never guaranteed. Yet within that fear was a lesson: you could still fight back. Even if you were small, even if you were scared. That's what makes Courage so haunting. It wasn't the CGI ghost of King Ramses, or the twisted grin of Freaky Fred, or the insect villain general, or the alien chicken. It was the way the show whispered truths about life through those monsters. That fear isn't something you outgrow, it follows you. It changes shape as you get older. As a child, you fear the dark. As an adult, you fear failure, loss, rejection. Courage's monsters reflected both. That's why we still feel them lurking in the back of our minds. And then there was the silence. The show dared to pause, to let the wind howl, to let Courage's eyes widen in panic while we sat waiting for the inevitable. That silence still echoes because silence is where our thoughts creep in. The show didn't just scare us with monsters, it scared us with our own imagination. That's a kind of horror you never outgrow, but here's the twist that makes it unforgettable. Courage wasn't just about fear. It was about love. Pure, stubborn, protective love. Courage screamed, cried, and shook, but he never let Muriel go unprotected. Every nightmare, every curse, every demon, he fought them not because he wanted to, but because he had to. For Muriel. For the one person who gave him kindness. That love was stronger than any monster. That's what turned his cowardice into courage, and maybe that's why the show still lingers in our hearts. Because deep down, we all want to believe that love can outshine fear. That even in the middle of nowhere, when no one else is coming to help, we can still stand up for the people we care about. Courage showed us that bravery doesn't mean being fearless, it means being terrified, but refusing to give up. When you look back, Courage didn't need an exorcist. He was the exorcist. He drove out the demons that haunted his home, not with rituals or prayers, but with loyalty and stubborn will. Each episode was another battle against darkness, another reminder that even the smallest, most frightened soul can stand against the unknown. That's why Courage the Cowardly Dog is more than just a cartoon. It's a story about survival, about love, about finding strength in the very place you think you have none. The monsters fade, but the lesson stays. Fear will always come knocking. But courage, true courage, is what opens the door and says, "Not today." So, in the end, courage doesn't need an exorcist. He teaches us that we all carry one inside ourselves. The power to face the shadows, to protect what we love, and to keep going even when every bone in our body says run. That's why courage still haunts us, not because he was scared, but because he showed us that being scared is okay. What matters is what you do after. The last laugh, the last scream, the last howl of the wind outside that little farmhouse. They stay with us. Because Courage was never really just a cowardly dog. He was a reflection of us all. And that's what makes him unforgettable.